Hello and welcome into the Take the North podcast along with Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. I am Mark Grote of Chicago Sports Radio 670. The Score. Big headline today. Shane Waldron out, fired as offensive coordinator and play caller of the Chicago Bears, promoted from within. Thomas Brown, previously the offensive passing game coordinator for the Bears. He is now the Bears' new play caller. He is the new offensive coordinator. This is his fifth year in NFL coaching. He had 9 years of college coaching experience. The most pertinent that you should know is that last year, 2023, he was the offensive coordinator in Carolina for Bryce Young and that Carolina Panthers team. It does need to be pointed out that he was under Frank Reich, who called plays up until the point he was fired. So essentially, no, exactly. Thomas Brown only called plays for 6 games with Carolina. Probably still not something he necessarily would brag about on his resume, but it is what it is. He was given those duties when Reich was canned. Thomas Brown, again, the Bears' new play caller, 3 years with the Rams under Sean McVay. And if I may, before we really get rolling here on the podcast and bring in Dan Wiederer, let me just read a few graphs because, this is kind of a dramatic moment for the Bears. And this came to Dan and I today on our phones for immediate release. Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. The Chicago Bears today announced that offensive coordinator Shane Waldron has been relieved of his duties. Offensive passing game coordinator Thomas Brown has been promoted to OC. And here is a quote now from Matt Eberflus. Quote, "After evaluating our entire operation, I decided that it is in the best interest of our team to move in a different direction with the leadership of our offense. The decision was well thought out, one that was conducted deliberately and respectfully," quote, close quote, said head coach Matt Eberflus. And he goes on to say, quote, "I would like to thank Shane for his efforts and wish him the very best in moving forward," close quote. And then one more graph here. Thomas, quote, "Thomas is a bright offensive mind who has experience calling plays with a collaborative mindset. I look forward to his leadership over our offensive coaching staff and his plan for our players," close quote, said Matt Eberflus. So trying to say all the right things, trying to do it as deliberately as possible now. We do know that was just out of respect to the man when some were impatient on this move being made. But Dan, the Bears just simply had no choice. I don't give them like a round of applause for doing this. This is what good NFL teams do. This was absolute essential competency for the organization.
It's what some good NFL teams do, and it's what some bad NFL teams do. But my first message starting out this evening, Mark, is welcome back, because here we are again, Crisisville, USA. All roads from Haugh Hall somehow lead in a circle. It's like a giant shamrock that puts you right back in Crisisville, USA. Intersection of dysfunction and desperation. We're right back here. We're here almost every year, sometimes multiple times per year. Certainly a half dozen times every decade, and the Bears are right back in the middle of it. Welcome. How you enjoying your stay so far?
It's unbelievable. And I honestly, Dan, before the show, by the time I was like, oh, let me start listing offensive coordinators. And then I stopped because I didn't want to do that. I'm not in the mood to play off. I've played the offensive coordinator game so many times on the radio. And when I'm out with friends, we just start naming bad offensive coordinators from the past. This is a systematic issue. And that's one of the things I wrote down too, Dan. How did we get here? How did we get to this point? Is this all because Geno Smith got good when Shane Waldron was the offensive coordinator in Seattle? Who's doing? Well, we know who's doing the vetting. Who didn't realize this guy was going to be one of the worst communicators, seemingly, just from the evidence, Dan, that you and I have collected, and we can't even reveal all of the evidence that we've collected, that this guy was a bad communicator who frustrated players to the point where they felt that they had to be, and we're using words like transparent now, they had to be transparent, and they had to speak out against one of the most powerful coaches in the organization.
Chosen by another historically poor communicator, the head coach, Matt Eberflus. This tree has so many branches off it, Mark, that we could spend 14 hours tonight. I know you don't have that kind of time. I don't have that kind of time trying to figure out where do we start? Do we start with the Shane Waldron branch, the Matt Eberflus branch, the Thomas Brown branch, the Caleb Williams branch, the Ryan Poles branch. I mean, you're talking about, when you're driving down the highway and your windshield gets hit with like a rock or something, and then your hope is that like, just don't let this thing spider. Let's just hope that this is a small chip. Well, this thing's spidering right now, and it's spidering to a massive proportion now, where it is not overreacting or overemphasizing things to say that there is a ton at stake for the future of the Chicago Bears over the next 8 weeks. There just is. You have a number 1 overall pick as your hand-selected franchise quarterback, and now you have a team that's in complete turmoil and needs to figure out a way to navigate it with what now appears to be definitively a lame duck head coach. I mean, barring some miraculous turnaround where the Bears win, 7 of 8 and get themselves in the playoffs, I don't know how Matt Eberflus survives this. This is the 3rd coordinator he has had to dismiss or walk out the door via a resignation, as was the case with Alan Williams in the last 15 months. This is the 8th coach either fired or resigned since the start of the 2023 football season. Your team is not winning. You are not putting them in position to be successful on a regular basis. And now you can't get your coaching staff right. Again, I don't know how Matt survives this.
Yeah, no, it's you're right. And Dan, I don't think you're one to call for jobs. I have not been, because it's hard for all of us. We're human beings. I don't frivolously throw around the offensive coordinator's got to go, the head coach has got to go. But you know what? It's time. It is time, and it is time that the Bears do something in season beyond firing a coach or displacing a coach or demoting a coach. Good on them to do what they did, but they absolutely had to do it. They've never dismissed a coach in season. And if this is on principle, if this goes to some historic thing that has always been done by the Hallises and the McCaskies, I'm sorry, then it's really dumb. Then you are not operating as an NFL franchise in 2024 is supposed to operate. Let's talk a little bit more about what this specifically Thomas Brown being the offensive coordinator / play caller. What will it mean? What difference will it make with him other than the symbolic changing of the guard? First of all, and I think that this is a good way to something to bring back here from this past Sunday, Dan. Somebody asked Caleb Williams about the possibility. This is before Shane Waldron was fired. This is after the horrible game against the Patriots. What if there is a new offensive coordinator? How big of a difference could that make? And this was Caleb's answer after the game on Sunday.
Matt said that it is on the table. He's evaluating whether to make a change in offensive play caller. Do you think that's something you could adapt to mid-season?
I mean, they're not going to reinvent the wheel in a sense. We're mid-season, it's not a decision for me. I have to do what Coach says. I have to do with whatever decision he makes, and I have to be fine with it. Will I be able to adapt? Yes, I will. We will be able to adapt whatever Coach decision he makes, and then from there we have to go out there and execute and win games.
I probably should have just stopped the audio at "you're not going to reinvent the wheel," Dan, because that's the fact, right? I mean, they have been working on this offense since you and I started covering OTAs well before this training camp even started. This offense was installed. There's not a lot you can do other than calling better plays within the schemes of this offense.
There's no question. I mean, you cannot in November, with 8 games to play, introduce an entirely new system. So what is going to be new about Thomas Brown? Let's start here understanding that this is a Band-Aid on a massive wound right now. And that's all you can do right now is try to bandage this thing up and keep it together as much as possible. What does Thomas Brown bring? He brings a new voice. It's a different voice than Shane Waldron's. If you've talked to Thomas Brown, as I have over the course of the last 6 months, you understand that there's a different level of or a different form of communication in the way he talks and communicates with people. He brings a different perspective. He's going to bring a different juice. I think the one startling thing about Shane from day one is how uncomfortable he seemed in a lot of different circumstances. There was a nerviness to him that from day one, you said, man, how is this going to hold up when things get a little bit bumpy? How is this presence going to resonate within the room of the offensive players that he's trying to lead? How is this going to create that connection you need with a rookie quarterback? Well, Thomas Brown has a natural charisma to him, a competitive juice that you feel every time you talk to him. That'll be new. you're going to need somebody that provides direction to the quarterback first and foremost, because I think what we've seen over the last 3 weeks coming out of the bye week is a quarterback that's lost a little bit. Somebody's got to help get him found again, and that's Thomas Brown's job with the staff that's going to hopefully rally around him. Kerry Joseph being one of the key voices in that conversation as well. So that's where you start. You're looking for a spark. It's crazy though, because Mark, here we are on November 12th, 2024, and the Green Bay Packers are coming to town this week. This isn't just like, okay, we got to reshuffle some things. This is a spotlight big stage rivalry game that you are reinventing yourself for. That's not going to be easy. We've already talked about what's behind it, but hopefully at the bare minimum, Thomas Brown's, insertion into this role will create some sort of spark and fire for this offense to get going and be a little bit more competitive than they've been the last 3 weeks.
And I hate though that we're depending on that it is, at this point we're at spark and fire, and that's real because of, as you said, Shane Waldron. At least the way it appears when we talk to Thomas Brown, he is the antithesis of that he seems like he's a good communicator. He seems like he's a guy that's pretty hyped up. But just from my experiences talking to these assistants, which you and I get to do out, like it's very informal feeling usually, just to take you behind the curtain a little bit when we're out in the hallway, the atrium out at Haugh, and we get these little clusters of interviews. We get to go from assistant to assistant. Part of their job, unfortunately, is to be the enthusiastic one, to be the cheerleader for their individual position. So I'm not ready to, as you said, Dan, the competitive juice. I'm not ready to say that that's a good reason that he's coming in, because that only lasts so long, and that's great. That you have, him as, a guy that could be a bit of a cheerleader, but that stuff, it wears out quickly, especially in the NFL. And we have seen it before, but man, you bring up the Packers. If the Bears somehow, some way were to figure out a way to beat Green Bay, and I would think early on, and we're nowhere near breaking down the Packers early on, the only way, Dan, is if there's a pick six, maybe, because Jordan Love has been a bit susceptible this year. And then if you have some sort of representative offense where we see a lot, because everybody wants them to run the football, and if you win that way, then you're talking about, then the Bears might have an offensive coordinator for the rest of the year. But this week is so important to that end. Other than that, it's not. I don't see Thomas Brown as the Bears offensive coordinator going into the future.
You can't walk out of Soldier Field on Sunday with a 20-point loss like you walked out of Arizona. You can't walk out of Soldier Field on Sunday scoring 3 points like you did against the Patriots. You have to show some level of resurgence as a football team for this thing to not come completely unraveled. And that's why I say these next 8 weeks don't really mean a whole lot in terms of the playoff picture anymore. We understand where the Bears are in the NFC. We understand how steep of a climb it would be to even dream about them playing a football game beyond week 18. But you can't just write off the last 2 months of the season and let your entire building crumble around you. Even with an understanding that, again, this coaching staff is probably in trouble. That's why, like, for Thomas Brown, like, sorry, man, like, I'm sorry that this is your opportunity again. You got the last 6 games in Carolina with a number 1 overall pick with everything falling apart around you. And now you get to do it again. You've got somebody else's system that you've got to run. You don't have the runway of 6 months to get yourself ready for these duties. It's just on the fly. Hey, can you clean up our mess for us? And this is the second time in 2 years that Thomas has to do this. I believe he is on the program at the podium on Wednesday at Haugh, sandwiched between Matt Eberflus and Caleb Williams. You talk about what's going to be a very informative and illuminating, 35 minutes or whatever it turns out to be up there. Get your popcorn ready, buckle in. There's a lot of questions to be asked. There's a lot to be heard here. And hopefully Thomas is ready for kind of that part of the equation of just kind of communicating vision and direction and what he can do in the short term. That's 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. These next 3 weeks, what can you do to provide a level of comfort and confidence for the rookie quarterback, who's obviously a little bit shaken right now, and now is going to, for the first time in his life, deal with what Chicago football noise sounds like.
Yeah, and one of the questions,
it's humming.
Oh no, dude. I mean, like, I'm looking at this tweet right here from Mark Silverman over at ESPN 1000. And his tweet was, after talking to a few people with knowledge of the situation, players went to Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles asking them to make a change at offensive coordinator. Okay. There have also been a few veteran players requesting that Tyson Bagent starts. That blows my mind just to think about that.
Are those
However,
veteran players Bob from Oak Park and Tim from Niles? I mean, is that where we're at? I mean, is that really where we're at? We're at the point where the number 1 overall pick has to be benched for Tyson Bagent, and you understand how much I love Tyson Bagent. I really do. But my goodness, right? Like, is that where we're at? I'd love to know the context of that. I would love to know the thought processes behind it. And it leads to I'll let you react to that, because I think it leads to a discussion that we just sort of touched on last week. That's kind of interesting to have in this current forum.
Yeah, well, my reaction to it is, considering some of the comments and body language that we have seen from veteran receivers on the Chicago Bears, like DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Like, I'm not saying I believe the tweet and that somebody actually did it, but it's, to me, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that they're, like, considering what we've heard from these guys, that they would say something to the coach. Now, Matt Eberflus, when I asked him if the players had any kind of role in this change that occurred, the offensive coordinator change, he said no, they did not. But it made me think too that, they probably did to some degree impose their will. So I don't know, Dan. Like, I don't know if it's true, but I certainly understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, I would like to know the tone and context of it, really, to understand. Is it just a suggestion that, Caleb's head is swimming right now? He seems a little overwhelmed. It would benefit him to just be off to the side for a couple of weeks to gather himself, or is it from the perspective of, man, this guy can't play and we got to get him out of here?
Wow.
And if that's the case, then you've got bigger problems. This is a perfect entry point for me to touch on something that we talked about last week when Drake May was coming to town. We talked about the environment that Drake May was in 2024 with a football team that wasn't expected to do anything this year. Drake May is allowed to lose football games and make mistakes without the world crashing down around him. That is not afforded to Caleb Williams because the Bears surrounded him with a lot of talent. They had a football team that won 7 games and was on the rise last year. They expected to be competitive and in the playoff chase deep through the regular season. And so now every single failure that they experience comes with a greater intensity to it. I had someone that I spoke with today, listen, we can get into this in a minute or two. The phone starts ringing in weeks like this from people around the league that want to check in, want to offer some perspective, want to, give some things. I had someone say to me, go watch the interception that Drake May threw against the Bears on Sunday. Again, it's one of the 10 worst plays made by a quarterback in the league this season. You know what they're not talking about in New England this week? The interception that T.J. Edwards had. Because Drake May won a football game by scoring 19 points, leading 1 touchdown drive. The defense played well enough, and because the Patriots aren't expecting to go anywhere. And so he's been given the ability to make those mistakes without it being like, oh, God, Chicken Little, come on in and tell us what your analysis of that play was. It's just something that's there. It's not here for Caleb Williams. And that's why I say this young man's skin and its thickness is going to be tested here for the remainder of this month and the remainder of this season. Caleb Williams turns 23 years old next Monday, Mark. So just put yourself back in your own 22-year-old body, your own 22-year-old mind, your 22-year-old psyche, and imagine how you would be handling this in the 7th month of your first job. Like, here's where you are. Like, how are you going to deal with this turbulence? Caleb's got a lot in front of him. And if he doesn't have unwavering support from the key people around him in that building, this thing could get ugly in a hurry. And when you talk about, like, I'm not one that thinks that a young quarterback can be broken easily in the first season, but my God, does this seem like a delicate situation if the Bears don't figure out ways to manage all of it properly in the next 6, 7, 8 weeks.
Yeah, and if they were to bench Caleb Williams, I think it would be to save Caleb Williams, not because I think the backup quarterback.
And it would almost be a Ryan Poles move, right? Like he'd be the one to do it.
Yeah, I would think that he would have to, because I think that the mandate from Ryan Pohl, or the mandate to start Matt Eberflus on game one, when Matt was asked that question, was it OTAs, Dan? I think is there going to be a competition? Nope. Caleb Williams is our quarterback, and that was he could not have been more exact and precise, Matt Eberflus, in answering. That's the only thing he was precise about in answering on Monday. Is Caleb Williams still going to be the quarterback? And he said, absolutely yes, because guess what? No matter what, and hey, if you're a Tyson Bagent fan, that's absolutely fine. Caleb Williams will have had I don't care what happens, a much more successful NFL career than Tyson Bagent. Now, if you want to talk about relativity, where he came from and all that, and count that as success for Bagent, Bagent is a backup quarterback in the NFL. There's a reason for that. We saw enough of the red flags from Tyson Bagent last year to know that he is not a starter in the NFL. So I want to make sure I get that out of the way. This would be, if it happens, for the good of protecting your quarterback, making sure his psyche doesn't blow up. And the other part is, look, if he does continue to play poorly, and as you said, if something horrible happens against Green Bay, and guess what? It's so far from inconceivable that something horrible will happen against the Green Bay Packers, and then they lose in a bad way. It might do Caleb Williams some good to stand on the sidelines for a game. You're going to get him back in there, and he's going to be your quarterback going forward. But you have to continue to do real things to make your team better and to make your quarterback better.
So let me give you two things to think about here, and we can discuss these a little bit. First of all, before we finish this little back and forth, remind me to take you in the time machine, because you'll be really thrilled to go on this
Dan,
Bill
I've been
and
trying
Ted.
to avoid the time machine, man. Come on.
Come on. It's Bill, Ted, me, and you. We're going to go see Socrates and Billy the Kid and whoever else in the time machine. We'll get some places. But we talked back in the spring on this podcast about how Chicago would be a character in this story, right? And that's a fan base that's super passionate about its football team, super scarred by 40 years of struggle, right? 35 years of struggle at this point. And that the understandable anger and impatience that was going to bubble up at some point was going to create a forceful dynamic that the Bears and their young quarterback were going to have to deal with. I think we're feeling that this week. And look, like, this has gone national now. Caleb Williams brought eyeballs to Chicago that weren't always here during the Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields era. I can't scroll through Twitter anymore without finding some national show that is pontificating or skewering the Bears or trying to figure out what the hell's going wrong in Chicago. And so that, coupled with this city and the fan base and where they're at right now with a raw, exposed nerve that is just being absolutely hammered on by the Bears' ineptitude, is creating a world that they have to navigate in. It's neither right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just reality. And I'm curious how you are kind of feeling that, observing it, seeing it, and trying to figure out where we go at a time where obviously the city is just on fire again.
It's shocking that we've arrived at this point again. And I probably should have done a better job at anticipating the potential for it. I think there was so much positivity coming into this season in terms of the offense that you had built, the players that were here, including, with the two most exciting being Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen from your offseason. Everything was so positive. And when you hear about the organization doing things differently, assuring Carl, that being Caleb's dad, Carl Williams, that, hey, why is it going to be? Don't worry, things are going to be different here. And it felt like that, and you could trace it. I'm drafting Rome Odunze. I'm going to go get Keenan Allen for this offense. I'm paying $50 million to the tight end. You got an experienced defense around you, and then I'll be damned if it didn't all collapse, because the hiring process in this organization, from head coach to then all the assistants, has been broken for decades in this organization, Dan. And so it should, while I am surprised relative to the beginning of the year that we're at this point, I probably shouldn't be surprised. And that's where, if I had done my history homework, I would be listing bad head coaches and bad assistant coaches in history. I will now, Dan, allow you to take me into your time machine because I think I'm ready. I think I just talked myself through it. I think I've done enough therapy. I'm ready to hear about bad things from the past of the Chicago Bears.
It is going to be a short trip in the time machine, but let's
Okay,
get in really quickly and go
Okay.
first to the Wayback Machine. Let me set this up first because for Friday and Sunday newspaper at the Chicago Tribune, I'm writing a piece examining the current wreckage that is the Bears. Grote, this is my 12th season on the beat. This is muscle memory for me at this point. I'm doing this all the time, surveying the problem. So we first get in the time machine and go back all the way back to the olden days of December 2021, when I wrote this long deep dive at chicagotribune.com with the headline that included disorder, dysfunction, disappointment. I got a call that day from an executive in the league that said, those are 3 Ds that you don't want attached to the to the resume of your franchise.
It's a System of a Down song, man. Jesus.
As the Chicago Bears systemic failures continue, one proposed remedy has become clear. You clean house. Okay, so wrote that. Oh man, that's really
it's heavy.
A painful thing. And what they do, they cleaned house. Everything went sideways. Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace was shown the door, and we ushered in a new regime. Well, now I'll take you back closer to the modern day. This is just last season. This is just, the week that the Bears were getting ready to go to New Orleans to play the Saints, when David Walker was the second coach on Matt Eberflus' staff to be shown the door in a matter of 6 weeks. And this is just I'm going to read you an excerpt from a longer piece that was up then at chicagotribune.com about last year's trip to Crisisville, which, as you're seeing, is an annual vacation. It's like spring break. Some people go to Panama City. The Bears go to Crisisville, USA. So listen to this and brace yourself here. I put this on Twitter for those who really want to read along with the podcast. It's time to support all the hopeful rhetoric with on-field evidence of momentum and success. The degree of difficulty remains elevated as the Bears attempt to steady themselves after yet another chaotic week. It started with a blowout loss on the primetime stage in Los Angeles last Sunday, continued with cornerback Jalen Johnson requesting permission to seek a trade the next day, and veered sideways again with Wednesday's firing of running backs coach David Walker for what is believed to be unacceptable conduct. The midway point of the season will officially arrive at halftime Sunday at the Superdome, and the Bears will land there with as many departed assistant coaches from Eberflus' staff as they have victories. They will land there with quarterback Justin Fields still injured, with promising young safety Jaquan Brisker dealing with serious concussion issues, with the offensive line still unsettled, with their playoff hopes all but dead, and with very little evidence to show they can consistently compete with better teams. On Wednesday, Eberflus was asked to describe the direction of a 2-6 team that has had far more turbulence off the field than success on it. Over the last 4 games, we're 2-2, right? He said, and the direction is good. I mean, holy crap, Mark. Like, how many of those things that we were talking about in November of 2023, Jaquan Brisker, concussion issues, quarterback problems, offensive line unsettled, playoff hopes dead, turbulence off the field, dysfunction, the head coach telling you 2-2 is a good start. I mean, good Lord. I like the repetitive nature of this stuff on this beat is mystifying and mind-numbing. You can get out of the time machine now and
it's
get Dave a bowl of food and we roll onward.
Dave, no, I'm actually glad that you brought us there, because it does bring up the larger topic here, and that is starting at the top with ownership, with George McCaskey, with Kevin Warren, and how they go about hiring people at all levels of everything in their organization. And that this is what we get. We get that, what you just said, the monotony, and that really, Dan, that just builds up more of a case that Matt Eberflus needs to not be here at this point, right? If everything is the same now as it was then, why is Matt Eberflus still here? There is a systematic issue. It's not, the organization is not jinxed. There's not a curse in this organization. It's not like Cincinnati, or bring up your any organization that has gotten better and solved their issues. The Bears' issues won't be solved until they change their hiring practices. And right now it continues to be bad.
It's just 10 months ago that Matt Eberflus took his team to Lambeau Field. Last time the Bears played the Packers, and it was thought at the time that was a quote-unquote moment, right, for the Bears to show who they were and what direction they were going. They had won 5 of 7. There was a feeling like momentum was headed in the right direction, and the Bears had a chance to kind of punctuate last season with a victory over the rival Packers that would have kept Green Bay out of the playoffs, that would have shown that maybe Matt Eberflus does have the chops to win big games and meet big moments. And they went up to Lambeau Field and they lost 17-9, and it was an ugly performance. And then ultimately the decision was made to gut the offensive staff, but give him another chance. And so like at some point, where do you set your bar with standards and consequences for not clearing the bar, right? Like, and so like at some point you have to go there. Kevin Warren's reputation when he came in here was that he wasn't going to settle. He wasn't going to say, good enough is good enough. He was going to push for everyone around him to understand what true excellence in the NFL is supposed to be. That's got to start with Ryan Poles. It's got to start with very difficult and detailed discussions about the missteps they made in retaining Matt Eberflus, entrusting him with the development of the number 1 overall pick at quarterback, going out before they made that pick and hand selecting the offensive coordinator to replace Luke Getsy. And Eberflus has failed in that regard of setting Caleb Williams up for an ideal launch to his NFL career. But now you kind of have to follow the staircase upwards to Ryan Poles. Hopefully we hear from him this week at Haugh. I don't know how he could stay mum in a week like this and just leave his pregame chats on ESPN 1000 to be the voice of what he has to say on everything. And eventually you got to take that staircase up to Kevin Warren as well and say, what are you looking for here? As somebody who wanted, when you took this job, to be involved in football operations, what are you looking for here to assure that this thing goes where it needs to go instead of the exact opposite direction? Because right now, fellas, this thing is headed down, 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 down.
Yep. And if Kevin Warren was there, I would use the exact words if he became available to us. How are you going to do things differently than what this organization has done in the past? Hey, Ryan Poles, how are you going to continue to do things differently and keep us off your back and talking about history? Because we don't want to do it either. Like, I mean, I like to, with my friends and when we're just kind of kicking it, of course, I love Bears history. I get into it, all of that, but I don't want to talk about it in this regard. I will say, this is the last thing I'll say, Dan. I don't know if you have anything else, but I was just looking at, like, I got a mess of papers on my desk here. This is this chart right here. This is from when the Bears schedule came out. I don't know why I use a player's chart, but I do.
I love it.
And I had the Bears. I'm so embarrassed right now because we were so excited when the schedule came out and the Bears looked legit. We assumed Caleb Williams was going to be great and this offense is good and this defense top 5 maybe. I had the Bears 8-1 up to this point, Dan. I don't know where you might have had them, but I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was excited and maybe a little bit out of my mind. But the only loss I had the Bears having was week 2, Sunday Night Football against the Texans. So, yeah.
I probably would have wrapped you with the yardstick if you had said that to me at that point and said, hey, chill out there, Grote. That's never going to happen. Are you new around here? I definitely didn't have an 8-1. I'd have to go back and look at what it was. But I certainly had them moving in a better direction than they're currently moving. And again, this isn't just the 4-5. It's the way the last 3 weeks have looked. It's the way that play or plays, as it may be in Washington, seem to torpedo the team for the last 3 weeks. It's the way that they gave up the touchdown run at the end of the first half in Arizona and lost by 20 points to a middle tier opponent. It's the way that they could not compete against a terrible opponent on their home field against the Patriots. And so, whoa, I looked it up today. The Bears are actually favored on the look ahead lines in both games against the Vikings. Every other game that they're going to be the underdog going forward, including 6.5 points to the Packers this coming Sunday. If the odds makers are right, and the odds makers find what they need to find, the Bears are going to be a 6-win football team. And at that point, I don't know how you look your fan base in the eye and tell them, we've got it under control, because you clearly don't have it under control. And you've made major missteps that have kept you from making the progress that you promised would occur. And at that point, man, how far does it go? And that's why I say it's that little crack in the windshield is spidering rapidly. And do you know who the good windshield repairmen are in this town? Is there an ad that they play on 670?
We have window
Score
guys at the Score. Yeah, we got all these windows.
Is it covered by our insurance? How much is the deductible? Like, what do we got to do? Because I don't think we can drive this thing much longer with the way this thing is going.
All right, let me end it like this, and I want to bring in Studs for this. Since you just said that about the 6-win team potentially, I am now going to do the following. I am
Studs gives us the repair people too. Safe like repair, safe like replace.
Studs, get in here, man, because I want to go around the room here, and I am setting a new Las Vegas over or under here at 7. And I simply want to know from both of you guys, are you taking the under on the Bears season, or are you taking the over on the Bears season? Fair to let our audience know that at the point that we are doing this, the Bears are 4-5. Which one, Studs, since you're new here on the screen right now, not new to the show, I'm the new guy on the show, and I'm doing this silliness. Over or under for the Chicago Bears for the rest of the season, 7?
If you're giving me 7 and you're not giving me a hook, I'm gonna say push. I'm taking 7.
What's with the hook and the push? I don't speak the language.
What you said, like, that's where I think that ends up at 7. Like, I think like
Okay.
I would bet 7. That's what I would bet.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you gave me 7.5, I would say under. If you gave me
Okay.
6.5, I would say over.
Okay, so
Like,
you got
that's
7 wins. Fair enough. Fair enough. My bad. Daniel?
I think 6.5 is the better line set here.
Okay,
Because-
all right.
But like I'm still going under because I don't see it. I don't see it in their current state. I don't see how they get right against this schedule and create the momentum that's needed to clear that bar. And so, man, like it's so depressing to understand that the Bears were standing on the field at Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland, with 25 seconds separating them from a 5-2 record and clear-cut direction. And here now they are at 4-5, and we're talking about, are they going to lose 12 games?
I'm the under too, and if even after the Arizona loss, I was still not thinking the bottom was going to fall out. It still wasn't. It was this loss and is these ongoings, and just knowing some of the things that we know inside of Hallis Hall, that their bottom is getting ready to drop out, and I am definitely picking the under for the Chicago Bears. I hope Caleb Williams gets really good by the end of the season.
Well, and the reason that they win 2-3 more games is the NFL randomness. Like, that's why I'm not going off of anything other than that. Like, they'll find a way to win 3 more games because it's the NFL, and they'll fall ass backwards into 3 more wins. Like, that's like that is my entire analysis of this.
I agree with you. My reason for that would be more because of the fact that there is talent on this team. Will that talent collapse and give up and all that? That's always a possibility, but they're just too good talent-wise to not have some of the, as you said, Studs, those random games.
It's crazy, right? Like it's going to happen. We got to go cover one on Sunday against the Packers. I would imagine that the Packers are diving into that film this week, and they're seeing a team that is wounded and defeated right now, and hopeful to jump out to a fast start against a team that has allowed its opponents to jump out to a fast start. Like, man, you've got your work cut out for you this week with all that's ahead of you and the opponent that's waiting to meet you at your home stadium. I don't know how they get it right. To our loyal listeners here that hear some background noise on this podcast, that's my just turned 6 daughter screaming in terror from a couple rooms away. I think my wife must be making her watch the film, the offensive film of Caleb and the offense from this last Sunday. So apologies for some of those high-pitched screams in the background. But, hey, we all got our issues to deal with, right?
I mean, at this point, that's just like, that's ambiance in life. I mean, I understand. Happy birthday, by the way. What's her name? Your 6-year-old daughter?
That's Abby.
Oh, happy birthday to Abby. I hope that is today her birthday proper?
No, yesterday. Remember, it was the anniversary of the quadruple doink game.
That's right. Things are happening so quick. Well, happy birthday to Abby. I hope she is happy. And on my end, I have radiant heat in my place. So if you started hearing all the noises happening right now, it's a good time to end this podcast. I have radiant banging heat. Part of the reason that I am leaving this home that I am in now for another one, but that's another story for another another day. Thanks to everybody for listening and watching and subscribing. This is a crucial time for the Bears. Dan and I, again, we are both out at Hallis Hall every day, so we will be reporting on and bringing you the Take the North podcast with all of the very latest as it happens. We'll do more podcasts if we have to keep up with the story. We promise you that. For Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune, for Adam Studzinski of The Score and the Take the North podcast, I'm Mark Grote. Thanks for listening and watching the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.